Hello everyone, I'm JG and welcome back to Music Forever, where today I'm going to be reviewing the newest album from Sunn, Pyroclasts. This is the second record that Sunn has dropped this year following Life Metal, the first project that was released back in, I believe, April of this year. A project that overall I thought was pretty solid. Not one of my favorite Sunn records or one of my favorite records of the year or anything necessarily, but I still think it was a good collection of music from the group, and I was pretty happy to have it, all things considered. And coming into this new record here, which the band announced quite a while back, I was a bit interested to see what they were going to do, considering the songs that appear on this thing came from the same sessions as Life Metal, and the fact that these two albums are being released the same year. You have to wonder if there is some kind of greater connection between the two, or if the band was going to try to do something interesting between how the two records sounded, or something like that. I was just interested to see what they were going to do with this thing, considering I like Life Metal quite a bit. And after hearing this thing, they definitely decided to push this record in a different direction than they did with Life Metal. This record overall is one that's a lot more reserved, I feel, a bit more simplistic and stripped back, also a fair bit shorter too. This thing only runs at about 43 minutes in length, whereas Life Metal was over an hour long. And yeah, as I said before, this thing is just a lot more simple and stripped back compared to Life Metal that dropped earlier this year, even though both albums come from the same general time period and recording sessions. Overall, though, I do have to say that Pyroclast is just not quite clicking with me as much as Life Metal did. Overall, I think this is an okay album, I guess. I would say it's pretty average, but it's just not super interesting, at least to me. A lot of the cuts on this thing just don't end up being super memorable. I feel like throughout this thing, a lot of these tracks are trying to establish an atmosphere and a vibe, really more so than having a ton of stuff go on in them, which is the case for most drone metal music. Even is the case for Life Metal for the most part, and the best of the music that this band has dropped in the past as well. However, I feel like on this project, it's taken to an extent where a lot of the songs on this thing just end up sounding a lot more boring than I think they needed to. On albums like Monoliths and Dimensions, or even Life Metal from earlier this year, for example, I could still pick apart individual aspects to the tracks on those records that I happen to really enjoy, even if those songs are really repetitive, and if as a whole album experience it could even start to be a bit repetitive, and the whole album just kind of feels like one big experience rather than a collection of individual songs. On this album, that is still kind of the case in the fact that this thing does feel like a larger collection of music and is still very drony and repetitive, but it's to the point where the project as a whole just kind of fades to the background when I'm listening to it. There are some things on this record that I do enjoy. For one thing, I think that the sound of this thing and the production here is really nice. On the one hand, it still sounds really fuzzy, and the atmosphere that they're able to establish here on this project with this sound is one that I really enjoy. And on the other hand, I also kind of feel like the production here is one that's pretty clear and easy to see through when listening to the project. It's not fuzzy and distorted to the point of you being unable to make out anything that's going on here in these tracks. It's simultaneously fuzzy and distorted and noisy, but at the same time in a way that just feels really clear. I guess kind of like how Life Metal was, which I guess does make sense given that these two projects are coming from the same sessions. Yeah, I just think the sound of this thing overall is really nice. I also really enjoy a lot of the openings to the songs on this project too. I feel like they do a good job of establishing the core atmosphere of whatever track it is, and they just sound really beautiful for the most part. Particularly tracks like Frost and Kingdoms, for example, which take their time kind of building up to the main portion of the track. They're a bit slower paced, really beautiful sounding. I think these intros are just really nice and definitely some of the highlights on the project as a whole. You also have tracks like Ascension that begin with this harsher sounding noise that once again establishes the core sound of the track itself really nicely, but at the same time in a way that's a bit different from some of the other songs on this thing. I don't know, overall I just feel like the openings to a lot of these songs are really interesting and well done. I just think that once a lot of these songs hit the main groove of the track is where they really kind of start to lose me. As a whole, though, I think the third track on this thing, which I won't try to pronounce because, yeah, I'm probably going to mispronounce whatever it is, and I apologize for that, but I think the third song on this thing is probably the strongest one here overall. It's definitely the song on the project where I feel like it has the most personality to it and the most going on that I could really enjoy while still maintaining the really spacious atmosphere that this album as a whole seems to be shooting for. I especially love some of the guitar parts that are kind of slowly going on in the background of this track while the main drones are going on as well. I think it's a really nice touch that I wish was maybe present on some of the other songs here. But overall, like I said before, I think that once a lot of the songs on this thing end up hitting their main groove is where they just start to lose a lot of interest for me. They just start to become a bit too spacious and droney for me to really get all that invested in. Again, I think they do a pretty decent job of establishing an atmosphere, but at the same time, I feel like compared to some of the other releases from this band that also do a good job of establishing an atmosphere, or even just some other drone records from other artists out there, I feel like this one just isn't particularly special or particularly interesting compared to some of the best out there, aside from this project, or even compared to a project like Life Metal that just dropped earlier this year. So overall, Pyroclasts is an album that I think is just okay at the end of the day. There's aspects to it that I think are good, but at the same time, I feel like these aspects never quite get to the point of making the album good enough for me to really feel compelled to return to this thing all that much in the future, especially when you compare it to things like the best of this band's back catalog, projects like Monoliths and Dimensions, for example, or once again, the far superior album they dropped earlier this year in the form of Life Metal. It's just a kind of average project, really, at the end of the day. I mean, if you like drone metal, you like Sunn, this is definitely a project that you should at least give a single listen to, because maybe you'll end up enjoying it more than I did, especially if you're into the more slower-paced, repetitive stuff, which I'm guessing if you like Sunn to any extent, or drone to any extent, you enjoy that sound, at least somewhat. But if you've never been a fan of this genre of music, or this band, I'm not quite sure I would say this album is going to change your mind or anything. And if you need this style of music to be maybe a bit more active than what you're getting on here, then yeah, this project won't do much for you either, I guess. But that is just my own opinion on this album. If you happen to disagree, that's perfectly fine. In fact, feel free to drop your own thoughts on this project in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, make sure you leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more music-related content, things like album reviews, track reviews, things of that sort. Once again, thank you for watching, and stay golden.